In 1995, after the Great Hanshin earthquake killed 6,400 people in under 20 seconds, the Japanese government commissioned a study that most emergency planners outside of Japan have never read. It was not a rescue protocol. It was not a rebuilding plan. It was a structural audit of every building inside the disaster zone that remained standing, and a detailed record of what happened to the people inside each one during the 72 hours that followed. The conclusion was 3 sentences long. The first 2 have been quoted in academic papers for 3 decades. They read, "The buildings that preserved the most lives were not the buildings with the strongest walls. They were the buildings with the shortest distance between a closed door and a person who knew what to do with the people behind it." The third sentence is the reason we are here today. We will come back to it. 6 years after Kobe, on August 29, 2005, the Louisiana Superdome became the most famous shelter in American history. 73,000 seats. A steel-reinforced concrete shell engineered to withstand Category 5 winds, backup generators, plumbed water supply, medical staging areas. By every engineering metric that matters, this was the ideal structure for 30,000 displaced people. Within 48 hours, the Superdome became something closer to a humanitarian crisis than a shelter. Not because the building failed. The roof held, 2 panels tore away in the wind, but the structure remained intact. The walls held. The generators ran for the first 36 hours before fuel ran out. What failed was everything that happened between those walls. No chain of command. No distribution system for water or food. Supplies arrived at loading docks and were swarmed rather than rationed. No assigned areas for families, individuals, medical needs. People slept in concourses, stairwells, luxury boxes, wherever they stopped walking. No communication protocol between sections of the building. No sanitation schedule. No person responsible for any single function. By the second night, the bathrooms were unusable. Medical emergencies were being shouted across the concourse rather than triaged, and the building that could comfortably host 73,000 football fans had become unlivable for 30,000 people. Not because of engineering, because 30,000 human beings in the strongest building in the city were operating without a single visible structure of coordination. And 300 miles east of New Orleans, during the same hurricane season, a church gymnasium in Biloxi, Mississippi, held 240 people for 11 days. Plywood-reinforced walls, no backup generator, 1 well pump. But within the first 2 hours after the doors opened, a retired school teacher had divided the gymnasium into 4 zones, assigned a water distribution schedule, posted a handwritten night watch rotation on the door, and designated 1 corner as a medical station with a clear path to the exit. The question is not which building was stronger. The question is which one was a fortress. And the answer to that question, along with the 5 buildings we are about to walk through, is what this video exists to examine. In the last video, we covered how to sleep when there is no one watching the perimeter. Techniques for 1 person in 1 room. Today we go wider. Not how to sleep, where to hold. There are 5 buildings that exist in virtually every American suburb, every small town, every mid-sized city within a 15-minute drive. We pass them every day. We park in front of them. We send our children to them, and when infrastructure fails, when the power grid goes silent and the highways fill with vehicles heading in the wrong direction, these 5 buildings become something they were never designed to be. But only under one condition, and that condition is not about concrete. We start with the building we overlook most completely because we associate it with children and cafeteria trays and Monday morning routines. The American Public School. Consider the engineering first. Most public schools built after 1970 were constructed with concrete masonry unit walls, 8 to 12 inches of reinforced block, filled with grout and threaded with steel rebar. This is not residential construction. This is institutional-grade masonry, rated for seismic and wind loads that would flatten a standard house. A typical elementary school provides between 40 and 80,000 square feet of usable interior space. A middle school or high school, 80 to 150,000. That is enough sleeping area for 200 to 500 people with separation between families, singles, and medical cases. But square footage alone is not what makes a school valuable. Compartmentalization is. A school is not one large open room. It is dozens of individual rooms connected by hallways with fire-rated doors. Each classroom becomes a module, a sleeping quarter, a storage room, a medical station, an isolation ward, a workshop, a meeting space. The hallways become controlled corridors. The fire doors become checkpoints. This is modular architecture that was designed from the ground up to manage large groups of people moving between defined spaces on a schedule. That was always its purpose. In a crisis, the purpose does not change. It sharpens. Water. Most schools have independent water supply lines connected to the municipal system, and many have roof-mounted water tanks for fire suppression, holding between 5 and 20,000 gallons. Cafeteria kitchens include industrial sinks, commercial gas lines for cooking, walk-in refrigeration units that can be repurposed for medical cold storage or secure food containment. The gymnasium provides open assembly space for group meetings and coordination. The parking lot provides a clear perimeter with defined entry points, and a school parking lot was designed for controlled vehicle flow, which means it already has choke points. Entries. A typical school has between 4 and 8 exterior doors, and in the United States, since the security upgrades that followed Columbine and Sandy Hook, most of them lock from the inside with panic bar hardware. Controlling 4 doors with a group of 20 is straightforward. Controlling 4 doors alone is a rotation problem that depletes you in 48 hours. This is where the building begins to reveal its deeper logic. On February 22, 2011, a magnitude 6.3 earthquake struck Christchurch, New Zealand. 185 people died. The central business district was declared uninhabitable. Entire city blocks collapsed into rubble. And within 72 hours, a network of university students organized what became known as the Student Volunteer Army, which eventually coordinated over 22,000 volunteers operating from a campus that had never been designated as an emergency facility. But the campus had everything. Rooms that could be assigned to task groups, kitchens that could produce meals at scale, open grounds for staging supplies and vehicles, a communication network through existing university infrastructure, and, most critically, a population that was already accustomed to schedules, assigned roles, and showing up at specific locations at specific times. The infrastructure of education became the infrastructure of response. Not because the walls were rated for earthquakes, because the people inside already understood how to function as an organized group within a structured building. A school is not a fortress because of its masonry. A school is a fortress because it was designed from the first blueprint to organize human beings in rooms, on schedules, with accountability. Every element, the bell system, the posted rules, the lunch rotation, the assigned seating, is a prototype for crisis governance. We never thought of it that way, but the building was ready before we were. The second building is smaller, quieter, and built to a specification that most civilians have never considered. A fire station is constructed to remain operational when everything around it fails. This is not a marketing claim, it is building code. Structural reinforcement exceeds standard commercial specifications by a significant margin. Foundations are overbuilt to support the static and dynamic weight of fire apparatus, pumper trucks, ladder trucks, rescue vehicles that weigh between 20 and 40 tons each. Floors are reinforced concrete slab, rated for repeated dynamic loading. Walls are typically poured-in-place concrete or reinforced CMU with additional steel framing. Roof structures are rated for wind and snow loads that would compromise standard commercial construction. But the engineering is only the first layer. A fire station is, by design, a self-contained operational base for a small team working under sustained pressure. Backup generator, standard in every station built after 1980, with fuel capacity for 48 to 72 hours of continuous operation. Independent or priority access water connection. Sleeping quarters designed for 6 to 12 personnel on rotating shifts, which means they already include bunks, storage lockers, and shared bathroom facilities configured for continuous occupancy. A kitchen designed not for occasional meals, but for feeding a crew around the clock. Communication equipment, often including a dedicated radio room with battery backup and antenna infrastructure. Medical supplies, not civilian first aid kits, but trauma-grade equipment, including oxygen, defibrillators, and immobilization gear. Vehicle bays that double as workshop and staging areas. Tool storage that would take a civilian household a decade to accumulate. Hand tools, power tools, cutting equipment, rope and rigging systems, lighting rigs. The footprint is compact, typically 5,000 to 8,000 square feet of interior space. That limits capacity. A fire station will not shelter 200 people, but it will shelter 12 to 20. And for a group of that size, no other building in a typical American town provides this density of operational infrastructure packed into this small an area. The Swiss have understood this for over a century. Switzerland has maintained a militia-based civil defense system since 1907. Not a relic, but an active framework, updated regularly and funded through federal taxation. At its foundation is a network of community response nodes, local facilities designated as coordination centers when centralized authority is disrupted or delayed. Fire stations serve as primary nodes in this network, not because of Swiss cultural tradition. Because the engineering specifications of a fire station, redundant power, water independence, communication capability, medical readiness, and shelter for a small coordinated team match the requirements of a crisis coordination point more precisely than any other civilian structure available in a typical municipality. 12 people in a fire station with assigned roles, a communication system, and a 48-hour operational plan are more effective than 200 people in a gymnasium with no plan at all. This is not philosophy. The Superdome demonstrated it by negative example. The Swiss demonstrated by institutional design. The limitation is capacity, and it is an honest limitation. A fire station is not where an entire neighborhood shelters. A fire station is where the group that coordinates the neighborhood operates from. One is a refuge, the other is a nerve center. The distinction determines whether the building is consumed by the crisis or directs the response to it. The third building solves the capacity problem entirely and introduces a problem that has ended more shelters than any structural failure. A distribution warehouse or big box retail structure, the kind that occupies the commercial edge of every American town, surrounded by asphalt and loading docks and chain link, offers something no other civilian building can approach: raw floor space. A standard distribution warehouse provides 100,000 to 500,000 square feet of open, column-free interior under a single roof. That is enough for 500 to 2,000 people with reasonable spacing, dedicated storage, medical separation, workshop zones, and activity areas. A single Walmart supercenter averages 180,000 square feet. A Costco distribution center can exceed 400,000. The engineering, while not institutional grade, is more than adequate. Steel frame construction with pre-engineered metal wall panels or tilt-up concrete sections. Concrete slab floors rated for forklift and pallet jack traffic, which means rated for any weight a group of human beings could place on them. High ceilings, 20 to 32 feet clear, provide natural airflow and ventilation that smaller, lower buildings cannot replicate. Loading docks on one or two sides offer controllable entry points designed for controlled vehicle access. Roll-up metal doors, dock levelers, concrete approach ramps. These are industrial-scale choke points, simple to seal, straightforward to monitor, and extremely difficult to breach without specialized heavy equipment. Water infrastructure depends on the building's original purpose. Grocery distribution centers have commercial water lines. Standard warehouses may have only fire suppression systems, but those systems are fed by gravity tanks or dedicated pump stations with on-site reservoirs holding between 10,000 and 100,000 gallons. That is emergency water for hundreds of people for weeks. Not indefinitely, but long enough to establish supply lines or purification systems. The problem is not the building. The problem is that a building this large, stocked with visible resources and filled with frightened people, becomes the single most dangerous location in a collapsed zone unless it is managed with a level of organizational precision that most groups never achieve. When warehouses in Puerto Rico were discovered years after Hurricane Maria, still packed with emergency supplies, water, food, cots, medical equipment, the public anger was justified. But the failure was not logistical. The supplies were there. What was missing was a distribution system, a set of rules governing who gets what, when, in what quantity, tracked by whom, reported to whom. Resources without organization is not a shelter. It is an invitation to conflict. A warehouse is the highest capacity civilian structure available anywhere in suburban America. It is also the structure that punishes disorganization most brutally and most quickly. 100,000 square feet with no assigned zones, no entry control, no rationing protocol, and no visible authority is not a fortress. It is a flashpoint. A warehouse becomes a fortress on exactly one condition. Someone stands at the loading dock on the first day and posts a clear, written set of rules before the first person walks inside. Not after, before. And if you think that sounds excessive, consider what the Superdome looked like 12 hours after the rules should have been posted and were not. The fourth building does something no engineering specification can replicate. It carries trust before the doors ever open. A church, a synagogue, a mosque, a community center. The specific tradition is not the point. What matters is the social architecture that the building represents. In most American communities, the house of worship is the only building where strangers already practice assembling in the same room, following a shared behavioral protocol, and deferring to a recognized authority figure without any legal enforcement. That pattern, arriving at a set time, sitting in an assigned or habitual place, listening, participating, contributing, leaving in an orderly sequence, is rehearsed weekly for years, often for decades. In a crisis, that rehearsal does not disappear. It becomes operational muscle memory. People who have practiced organizing do not forget how when the stakes rise. They accelerate. The engineering is more robust than most people assume. Many houses of worship built after 1950 use load-bearing masonry or steel frame construction with brick or stone veneer. The main sanctuary provides assembly space for 100 to 800 people under a single high-ceilinged room. The fellowship hall, basement, or multi-purpose room provides secondary space suitable for sleeping, medical triage, childcare, or food storage. Kitchens are standard, often commercial grade, designed and equipped for community meals serving hundreds. Parking lots are generous by design, providing staging, perimeter, and in some cases, enough asphalt for a garden or water collection system. Many churches maintain their own well or rainwater catchment, but the decisive advantage is the human layer that the building inherits. During the Siege of Mosul, between 2016 and 2017, neighborhoods in eastern Mosul that were trapped between advancing Iraqi military forces and withdrawing fighters organized their survival around mosques. Not because the buildings had the thickest walls, many were partially damaged, because the imam was the one authority figure whom every family in the neighborhood already recognized. Families arrived already grouped into existing social networks. Resource sharing followed patterns that had been established over years of community life. Who gives, who receives, who mediates. Conflict resolution had a structure, informal and imperfect, but functional and accepted. In the neighborhoods where mosque-based organization held throughout the siege, civilian casualty rates were measurably lower than in neighborhoods where families scattered into individual residential buildings and attempted to survive in isolation. A church does not become a fortress because of its walls or its roof. A church becomes a fortress because the people who walk through its doors have already rehearsed the single hardest element of group survival. Voluntarily organizing around a shared protocol, deferring to authority that is imperfect but accepted, and showing up again the next time. For a group that has no prior organizational structure and no time to build one, a house of worship offers the fastest path to functional governance available. Not because of faith, because of practice. The fifth building is the one that nobody puts on any survival list, and it may be the most strategically valuable structure in a typical American town. A multi-level parking garage is constructed with post-tensioned or cast-in-place reinforced concrete, engineered to support the concentrated static and dynamic loads of hundreds of vehicles, which means it will support anything a group of human beings could place on its floors without concern. A standard parking structure provides 3 to 6 levels of open, ventilated space with clear spans between columns of 30 to 60 feet. No interior walls to limit sightlines, no windows to breach. Ramps provide vehicle access to every level. Stairwells at each corner, typically 4, provide controlled pedestrian access points. 4 stairwells mean 4 checkpoints. The primary advantage is elevation. In any suburban or urban environment, a parking garage is typically the highest publicly accessible structure within a mile radius. The top level provides unobstructed 360-degree observation of the surrounding area, roads, intersections, buildings, tree lines, movement. In conditions where cellular networks have failed, radio range is limited, and electronic intelligence is non-existent, visual observation from an elevated position becomes the most reliable information-gathering capability available. One person on the 5th level of a parking garage with a pair of binoculars and a notebook can track movement, vehicle traffic, fire locations, and group activity across a 2-mile radius in every direction. That information, relayed to a coordination team in a fire station or a school, transforms every decision you make from guesswork into situational awareness. Ventilation is inherent to the design. Parking garages are open-air structures by code requirement, which eliminates dependency on HVAC and electrical power for breathable air. Concrete provides substantial thermal mass, storing heat during the day and releasing it gradually at night, maintaining interior temperatures more effectively than steel or glass structures. Drainage systems are integrated into every level. The limitation is exposure. A parking garage offers no insulation from wind or rain, no water supply, no kitchen, no privacy. It is not a place where people live. What it provides is something that no other building on this list can offer: the ability to see. And in a collapsed environment where accurate information is the scarcest and most valuable resource, the building that gives a group eyes across the horizon is the building that enables every other structure on this list to function. A school surrounded by uncertainty is a shelter. A school linked to a parking garage with a line of sight to every approach road is a fortress. A parking garage is not where a group lives. It is where a group watches. And when paired with a school 4 blocks south and a church across the intersection, a concrete parking structure becomes the element that transforms a collection of buildings into a network. Not a shelter, a watchtower. 5 buildings, a school, a fire station, a warehouse, a church, a parking garage. Each one engineered for a purpose that has nothing to do with crisis survival, and each one, under the right conditions, capable of becoming something its architects never imagined. Look at the pattern. A school provides compartmentalized space and a template for organizing groups. A fire station provides command infrastructure for a small, coordinated team. A warehouse provides capacity and resources at scale. A church provides social trust and rehearsed behavior. A parking garage provides elevation and information. No single building does everything, but together, within a square mile of each other, connected by people who understand what each one offers, they form something that no individual structure could ever be: a system. And a system, unlike a building, does not depend on the strength of any one wall. It depends on the connections between them. The right conditions are not structural. They are human. That Kobe report from 1995, the structural audit commissioned after 6,400 deaths, contained a third sentence that the academic papers rarely quote. The researchers added it almost as an afterthought in a footnote to the final section. It read, "In every case where a surviving structure transitioned into a functioning shelter, the transition was initiated within the first 4 hours by no more than 3 individuals acting without external authorization." 3 people, 4 hours, no orders from above. That was the variable. And if you are watching this and thinking about the 5 buildings closest to where you live right now, that is the right question. Not the thickness of walls, not the backup generator, not the water tank capacity, not the number of exits. 3 people who understood that a building is a container, and what transforms a container into a shelter, and a shelter into a fortress, is the decision to organize the people inside it before fear fills the space that structure should have occupied. The Superdome had 73,000 seats and 30,000 people, and not one person in those first 4 hours who stood on a chair and said, "Here is how we are going to do this." A gymnasium in Biloxi had plywood walls, 1 well pump, and a retired teacher with a marker and a piece of cardboard. Every building on this list is within a 15-minute drive of where we sit right now. We park in front of them. We walk past them carrying groceries. We drop off our children at their doors. And each of them is waiting for the same thing. Not an earthquake, not a grid failure, not a hurricane. A clipboard on the wall of a fire station, 1 line written. The rest of the page blank. And the sound of a door opening. Whether the person who walks through that door has anything worth offering beyond a pair of hands, that is a question of skills. Not the kind that take years. The kind that take a single afternoon and change the answer to one question when someone looks across the room and asks, "Who here can do something useful?" Do we have an answer?